Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music with the legendary Nick Perri.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm better. I'm better now. So we had
Thank you for having me.
absolutely, man. I've been a fan of yours since like that first Silver Tide record, and just followed everything you've done ever since, and been lucky enough to got to chat with you once before and buy an amp from you, and just kind of got to one step closer. So it feels really special, and thank you for your time. Um,
You're
the
welcome.
first thing I like to ask everybody, because you're a lifelong career musician, a bona fide rock star, what was the thing that you saw that made you say, that I want to do that with my life?
Um, well, saw or heard or both.
Whichever order came first.
I was given by my aunt, so I was raised in a pretty conservative, um, Italian household, pretty strict actually. And but my mom's sister, she was like the rock and roll one of the family. My aunt Dode, she's no longer with us, but she was the coolest, and she would pick my sister and I up on Saturdays when my parents were working and take us for the day. And she had a Camaro, and she would drive with the windows down, music cranked. And I remember, I mean, she played lots of things, but when I finally, it had to be like the right age with the right exposure, like the right thing, had to happen at the right time. Timing is everything, right? So it was I was 12, and it was just the right time. And she gave me Highway to Hell on cassette and Pearl Jam 10. For me, it was over. It was like school was out, rock and roll was in. Um, that being said, I went to a Catholic school. I had like the shirt and tie and the school uniform and the whole thing. And I rented from Blockbuster Video a VHS tape of AC/DC Let There Be Rock and Angus, because I hadn't seen the band. You know what I mean? It was just like, you had the image on the front, but like that's all you had on the cassette. There was no YouTube and stuff like that, right? So I got to see this VHS of Bon Scott, which was his last concert from Paris with the band, and saw Angus, and I like immediately identified because I was like, I'm him. I'm just missing the Gibson SG. You know what I mean? Like I'm already wearing the schoolboy outfit every day. I went to an all boys like Catholic school, and so I really like identified, and it struck, and I went like I can do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do it. You know what I mean? But I just went like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I guess kind of the naivety and the bizarre confidence from somewhere like enabled me to think that I could just like do it. And and then I did, and then like a few years later I got signed. It was just an absolute wild ride. But those moments were mega for me. And there were other tapes too, because that Blockbuster Video that was near my house also had Song Remains the Same on VHS, Live Without a Net, Sammy Hagar, his
Mhm.
first tour with Van Halen, live from New Haven, Connecticut. And there were a couple other ones, but those were the big three. And Pearl Jam, I got really into Pearl Jam. They were like, because that was happening at that time. AC/DC was a bit of a throwback even then. And but Pearl Jam, that felt like my band who was happening like at that moment, and Nirvana and all the 90s stuff was big for me. But Pearl Jam was really like, it felt like my personal band.
I hear that, brother. I'm a tremendous Pearl Jam guy. I argue with people constantly over, Nirvana or Pearl Jam, and they both did something amazing. But Pearl Jam for me was a big gateway to a lot of stuff. And ironically, I had a Hollywood video close to my house, similar to Blockbuster, smaller chain, both gone now. But for me, it was that Van Halen tape. Absolutely, it was the year and a half in the life of Metallica, the double VHS, and then Pink Floyd Pulse. So I saw like the
Ooh,
laser,
yes.
and I stole that one. I never gave that tape back. So sorry, Hollywood, come get it. But I still have my Pulse.
I had Pulse on VHS as well a little later. Wow, that's so cool. Um, wow, the memories, man, you're bringing me back. I mean, that was mega for me because then I also had, and it's interesting because Floyd played a huge role in my. Pink Floyd is my all-time favorite band of all time, number one, even above the Beatles. Beatles are number two. Pink Floyd is number one. Um, and that band played a huge role in how I've gotten to here. But I remember when I was discovering it, it's interesting because now we have the history and we know like, okay, well, these were the years with Roger Waters and these are like the big four albums and blah, blah, blah. But like when I was a kid and discovering stuff, I didn't know anything about who was in the band, who wasn't in the band, who was doing what. It was just like, did you like the music or not?
Right.
So actually um, the first Pink Floyd. Well, that's not true. I heard Dark Side of the Moon. It was life changing for me. I had like an out of body experience to Dark Side of the Moon. But then I immediately heard the Division Bell, which came way later, right? But I loved it, and it didn't equate to me yet, like what was so different about it. It's just like I love the record. You know what I mean? And then I got the Wall after the Vision Bell. So it was like a lot of skipping around. I didn't get Wish You Were Here until years later. I didn't get Animals until years later. For me, it was really Dark Side, then the Division Bell, then the Wall. And but it's just interesting because it's just now we have all the knowledge of that whole thing, and maybe somehow that slightly skews our listening perception of it. You know what I mean? In a weird way. Whereas like when you don't know anything, you just go on the music, not the personalities, not the this was happening or he was doing this at this time or you know what I mean, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And it, again, man, very strange, these parallels. And I think we ran into a few of these the last time too, is when I was watching Pulse, I didn't know the order of anything either. There was no YouTube, there was no nothing. I fell in love with the song Sorrow. And my guitar teacher was a bass player in a nationally touring Pink Floyd tribute band. So I come to my lesson
Wow.
and I'm like, dude, I just heard this Pink Floyd song, Sorrow. It's my favorite. And like he was, a purist of the previous material. And there was so much of those two, Delicate Sound. No, what was it? It was
Delicate Sound of Thunder,
yeah, and then Division Bell. All those
Division
songs
Bell.
were happening on
Also, Momentary Lapse of
that's
Reason
the
or
one. Yeah,
Momentary. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, dude, I love this song Sorrow. And he's like, hold on a second. And he gave me double album for the Wall. And he's like, check this out. I'm like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah. For
That's a
me on Division Bell, I mean, Sorrow is great, but for me, High Hopes was like,
yeah,
I mean, with the lap steel solo at the end, like the whole, it just, I mean,
yeah,
that's a standout for
yeah. I
sure.
get that solo gets me emotional. I don't know. There's something about
Yeah,
the lap steel, it just stabs you in the heart.
yeah,
So
and he does perform that on Pulse.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Which at the time I was a young guitar player. I didn't know what the hell that was. I was like, what kind of guitar is that? Oh, that's what that is. Holy shit.
yeah.
Um, so you mentioned chronologically, so you're in the Catholic school, you find the rock and roll, and then you were very young when it all clicked and signed and stuff. Like, what was your guitar playing arc from like starting to play to your practice routine? Like, how did you get to be Nick Perri?
Um, I'm also type A personality, which may or may not be a surprise to some people, but for people who know me, they're rolling their eyes right now. So when I get into something, I go like all in. There's no like moderation. Moderation comes after like I learn a lesson, and then I go like, oh, I need to moderate, and it's still happening. I'm in my late 30s, and I'm still like having to learn hard lessons. Like when I get into something, I just get so far in, and then I like, oh, I can't do that every day, all day. You know what I mean? It's like I'm still learning that lesson. It's an odd personality trait. I don't want to say flaw because it's helped me in life in some ways, but it's also been something that I need to like, keep an eye on. It's like when I discovered the white chocolate macadamia Cliff Bar, like I had 10,000 white chocolate macadamia Cliff Bars. Like it just, because I knew that I liked it and it worked with my body. I've, whatever, a weird gut. And it was like, oh, that's safe. I can eat that. I'll just eat like 10,000 of them. It's that kind of thing. So with guitar, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. With guitar, um, I I didn't come up for air from the moment that I started playing. I asked my parents if they would buy me a guitar, and they said no because I'd done soccer and I'd done basketball, I'd done baseball, I'd done karate, and I didn't stick with those things. Um, I also was into BMX bike stuff and skateboarding, so I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. But when I discovered music, I was like, I have to play guitar. So they rented me a guitar, and it was like a nylon string classical guitar with the action was like this. It was brutal, but I never put it down. And I wrote my first song the very first day that I had the guitar. It was awful. It only had like notes on like two of the strings, but it was something that I felt like that I was able to produce organically, and it made me in some way fulfilled. So from that moment on, it was really like a balance of like learning about songs and how songs were written and playing. So, and I say that as a distinction and including the song thing because that's been a parallel my whole career. It's not just about playing guitar, although I love playing guitar. I'm equally into songs and like being able to use the guitar playing to uh, write a song to convey like some sort of emotion. And I think ultimately when we're talking about high hopes and we're talking about our favorite uh, music and our favorite songs, like it's because we connect with a feeling, and that more than anything. And we'll talk about Terra Firma, I'm sure at some point, but like the idea of capturing a feeling is what really has kept me in this game for so long without losing interest because I'm still unraveling the ball of yarn as to like how to like convey feeling and emotion through this piece of wood basically with some strings on it. But it was a totally immersive thing. So I was playing way more than 8 hours a day. I was playing every hour that I wasn't in school. I had a guitar on, or I wasn't doing homework, and I did get like a weight set in my basement too. So like I take a break, like lift some weights. I was also getting into girls at the same time. So like I was trying to balance all the things, but it was mostly guitar, and I would play every minute that I wasn't eating food, doing homework at school, or lifting weights. And and the cliche thing, like my mom would come up to make sure that I was asleep, and I was asleep in the bed with a guitar, like every night. That's how I went to bed, and I woke up, and I would wake up even earlier than I needed to go to school because I wanted to play. And I remember specifically when I got the Nirvana Unplugged from New York acoustic. I got the Tab book, which I just found cleaning out my parents' garage, and one second. I wonder if it's right here. And I remember what song like I wanted. Yeah, here it is. Look at this. So this is the actual one I had as a kid,
It's amazing.
and I really wanted to learn "Come as You Are." And I mean, I wanted to learn all of them, but like when I learned how to play that song, and I remember it was like before school. It's like I woke up earlier to like practice before I went to school, and I was so excited that I could play one of my favorite songs. And so I just stayed in it, like it was nose down. My friends were doing other things. Eventually, when I got into high school, people were doing other things. Some people were partying, whatever. Like I didn't have time for any of that. Like I just was focused on like writing songs and learning how to play guitar all the time, and soaking up inspiration. I was renting all the VHS tapes. I had some older mentors in my church. Um, I went to the parish that my family belonged to had a folk group that I started playing in, playing acoustic guitar and like singing songs like at church. And there were some older gentlemen in that group, and they were like giving me like here's Led Zeppelin. Like, can you imagine like to a kid who's just like at that age and going like here's Led Zeppelin 2, like, and like I get chilled just thinking about like the first time hearing a whole lot of love or hearing Heartbreaker, you know what I mean? Or like just like mammoth experiences, that have changed the course of my life, right? So it was really just like digesting at lightning speed from 12, 13, 14, 15. By 15, I was wanting to play music with other people, and um, I had hooked up with the drummer at my high school, and we went to an open mic sort of situation and met Mark and Walt, who went to a different Catholic high school right up the road. And I was singing, I was playing lead guitar, and I was singing and had drums. Um, but Walt was singing, and Mark was playing like rhythm guitar, and Walt was singing. But it was instantly apparent that like Walt's strong suit was vocals. Like he was crushing it. Even he was a few years older than me, so if I was 15, he was 18. He was already like the best singer I'd ever heard, you know. And it was like it felt like, oh my god, like I just discovered like who is this guy,
Wow.
you know. And so we hooked up immediately because it was like a puzzle. All we needed was a bass player. So I was my strong suit was lead guitar, and Mark was playing rhythm guitar, and Kevin was playing drums, and we got a bass player there who didn't work out named Chris Smith. And then eventually he left the group, and we got Brian in, and then the rest is history. So we ended up going down once we got together. We played in my parents' basement, January 2001, and not long after that, we had like some songs together, and we went to an open mic on South Street, which is like the Sunset Strip of Philly,
Right.
you know, and where all the clubs and bars and we walked in and we played an open mic there. We were just kids, like we couldn't even shouldn't even have been allowed in. I don't know where we got the balls to try this, but we walked in, we set up our shit, we played, and it was just like kismet or whatever you call it. But the owner of the club, very legendary guy in the Philly music scene named Al Geary, who just passed away, he was there and he saw us, and he must have like saw the thing that everyone else came to see, but we couldn't even see it ourselves. But he saw the thing and was like, I want to book you guys to have to actually like play here. But we only had a few songs. So it was like we had to go home and like write a bunch of other songs. And we never played covers. It was never a cover thing for us. Like we always wanted to play our own music, and which fit in alignment with me. When I was young, I was learning initially, like, oh, how to play Come As You Are, how to play the other album that was big for me was 16 Stone by Bush.
Yes.
And learning those songs and like, oh, Glycerin, like, okay. And
Machine.
then, oh, yeah, Machine Head, of course. Um, Little Things, Everything Zen. I mean, all those they're big songs. They're killer songs. Um, and so it was just really about like figuring out how songs were written. But then I didn't stay on that. Like then I immediately like took that to write my own song. You know, I wanted to like take that knowledge. Same thing with lead guitar. It was like I sat down to learn. A pivotal moment was learning "You Shook Me All Night Long," the guitar solo, and I started to figure out like, oh, this is like how you compose a solo, and this is like using major and minor pentatonic, blah blah blah, and like, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm going to do my own thing. You know what I mean? And I did the same thing with Slash, with November Rain, and with Don't Cry, and with Sweet Child of Mine. Like I learned those three solos, like note for note, and like why does this work over what chord and what note? Okay, got it. Now I'm going to write my own version. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of the approach. So by the time I was 16, we went from playing one night a week on South Street to two, to three, to four. By the time I was a junior in high school, we were playing 5 nights a week. And I was kind of going to school and also kind of not going to school. And everybody knew there was like a buzz, and everybody knew that something was going on. And we got a spot opening for Aerosmith when they came through town. Um, and we were now doing showcases for labels. And we had a manager who this big music lawyer in town saw us at a show and offered to manage the band. And we said yes. And he had, you know, a ton of connections. He started inviting record labels down. And the next thing we're signing a deal with Clive Davis. Like it all happened very fast. It was very hard to process. And then the rest of my life continued to go really fast until it all ended. I was like 22, and it was like it ended in a fireball. It ended as fiery as it started. And then I had to go like, oh my God, like what just happened? That was just like a 7 year, time warp. Um, there was a long answer, but I hope I connected the dots from
Absolutely.
playing, from hearing ACDC to getting signed. That was pretty much it.
No, that was great. And you gave me a bunch of really good jumping off points. And I have ADD brain, so I'm trying really hard to hold on to all of it. So first of all, this channel that this is on, this is a education channel. I own a music school. So to hear you say, basically, do the work. You did the work. You busted your ass. You fell in love with the instrument. You're passionate. You're an all-in kind of guy. That's tremendous advice to anyone starting out playing. And then the point you made about the first time hearing Heartbreaker, things like that. I get to see that every day of my life with young people. Like I'm the dude who gets to turn kids on to these songs, and it makes me
That's the
really
best.
every second. And it's like, or the kid comes in with the nylon string with the action, an inch above the fretboard, but they love it. So, dude, all of that, like you just hitting me
And,
straight.
and a note for all the kids who are watching, I did take lessons as well. Not for a long time, but I did. I think that was super helpful for me, and I was able to ask questions in real time and go like, why
Yeah,
this, why that. And I was able to get some answers where, and then I was filling in the blanks with the stuff I was learning by ear, with my favorite records. I wanted to make a point of saying that because it all played a role in my development.
absolutely, brother. No, and I appreciate that part. And it's true. Like I see, we have a student currently who's really like he has the it factor, whatever. Parents wanted to yank him out, and I was like, all right, let's finish out the month. And all of a sudden, he's showing me all the songs he's learning off YouTube, and he's setting up the chords with the wrong fingers or just technique stuff that's wrong. And I had to have a private conversation with the family that, listen, your kid's going to be a fantastic musician, but he's building lifelong bad habits he'll never get out of. So having the ability to ask a question is definitely an added benefit. I want to get into all the Silvertide stuff. That guitar is making my brain go crazy, but I want to go chronologically. So this record is where we're going to talk now. I got your signature on there too. I got that special one.
Nice.
So double album, bold choice, hit it out of the fucking park. Like I texted you the day this came, I was like, "What is going on here? This is incredible." Please, because where we left off last time, you were sort of in the demoing process of this. The first record had come out, and this was maybe coming, and then you kind of went away. So, what was this process? Because this is brilliant, brilliant work.
Gosh, thank you so much for saying that. That was a doozy, man. I'm looking back now, and I almost don't know how I did it. Because coming out of, because I mean, when the last time we spoke, we were like still in pandemic mode, right?
Yep.
And I guess it all starts with songs, and it was no different. I was writing songs. In fact, I had written a song before. It was like February 20. So, "Waiting for You,"
Okay.
the opening, which we'll talk about quite a bit. So that's the opening song on Terra Firma. That song I wrote in January or February of 2020, before, like, we heard like rumors that like some people might be sick in China or Italy, but like it was before it came to America. And I wrote that song, and it was slow. It wasn't a ballad, but it was a very slow down tempo song. But it was all there. I mean, the chord progression was there, the lyrics were there. The rhythm of the lyrics were different because the song was so much slower. But basically, so once I turned in Sunvia to be, because you turn it in to be distributed, excuse me, digitally on vinyl, whatever the situation is, months and months before the world is hearing it, right? So it's like it was turned in, and once I like got the weight of that off my shoulders, I just continued to write songs. And I was writing, and I had like little things that I liked, like, oh, I like this, I like that, I like this, but it was kind of spread out, and I didn't know how it all worked yet. And then we went into the pandemic. We moved across the country. I did release Sunvia, as you know, and there was some success with that, with feeling good. I was on the road. I was touring that record even through the pandemic. My booking agent's a rock star in his own right, and got us amazing shows. And we did drive-in theaters and like all kind of crazy stuff. And all the while I'm writing songs, and I didn't have the idea though of how it all worked. I just knew that like I was writing songs that I liked, and that there may be some centralized theme with where I was going through with stuff in my own life, like having to come to, you get to a certain age and then you actually have to face, and there are obviously millions of people who face loss and who question their existence and existentialism and spirituality and like what their purpose is, and like people experience that at all ages, some very young. I was not one of them, so like I started to get into my 30s and like experience some of these things, and it kind of like really um knocked me off my feet a little bit, and I started to write about some of these things, and there was just an authentic for where I was at in my life. I mean, just the same way that the songs on Sun Via, and at the time, 15 years earlier with Show and Tell, those songs were what we were doing at that time. You know what I mean? They reflected. I think any artist is they're usually writing about things that are relevant to them at that time. You know what I mean? So I eventually went up to the Poconos. I don't know if this is before or after we spoke, but I went up to the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, for people who are watching this who don't know where that is, solo. And I spent a week up there, 8 days, Han Solo, with a tape machine and a small Pro Tools rig and my guitars and a bass and a keyboard. And I just started like hammering out some demos. And I had this tape echo, this tube tape echo, and it was set to a certain thing from a different song I was working on, and I hit the thing, and it went like, and it was like, oh, and then like I just started playing this like chord progression, but it was the same chord progression from Waiting for You from like a year and a half earlier, and it was all of a sudden like really up tempo and a whole different thing, and I started singing it, and like all of a sudden like the clouds parted, and like I cracked the code on that song. And when I cracked the code on that song, and the reason why I'm saying this is and then I did the demo right there in the Poconos of that song. I felt like I'd cracked the code on marrying the right amount of hope and melancholy and nostalgia and like all the things that I was feeling. Like I got the balance right, which gave me a feeling, going back to what we were talking about before, about like music giving you a feeling. Floyd gives me a feeling. AC/DC gives me a feeling completely different. The War on Drugs, a modern band that I love, My Morning Jacket, they all give me like a feeling, right? All of our favorite music gives us a feeling. So what I was feeling, which I was having a hard time like translating it to tape, I finally got the right mix, and it wasn't all melancholy, it wasn't all hope, there was like the right balance of all of that had to be present to make the feeling, and I got it with Waiting for You, and it was the right, and I think part of that comes from the layers of the guitars, the synth which is underneath, it's creating like this sort of sound, this kind of nostalgic thing, and the lyric and just the whole way that it worked together, it gave me like the feels, and I was like, I got it. So then that allowed me to take a lot of the other songs that I had sort of floating around and rework those songs and look at those songs through the lens of this new feeling that I was able to capture. And then it was like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. I now have a bunch of songs that work. And then I was like looking at the track listing, and I went back to Philly, and I got in a room with the guys, and we had a giant whiteboard, and I wrote on the whiteboard all these songs, and I just wrote them down in the order that I was like just somehow intuitively feeling, which is crazy because that actually became the sequence a year and a half later, my original whiteboard thing. And even though I had tried like 10 other sequences, I ended up going back to the original freaking whiteboard thing, which is so gnarly. And when we played, and there was a few things that were missing, like I Want to Be Free. I had started the song, but I didn't want to finish it without my band. I knew that was going to be like, sometimes as a songwriter, like, and I don't know how other people do it, but for me, like I'm working on a song like with Waiting for You or Terra Firma or The Pines. Like I knew I had the whole freaking song there. It was there. It was, and I could demo it. I could get it out and go like, here it is. It's a completed thing. It's done. Now we just need to execute it better. But there are other songs where you're like, you know what? I think the song would um, it would be enhanced by the collaboration of others. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to finish. I want to be free. I had the chorus already. I had the verse. I had 60% of what it sounds like, but I didn't want. I knew that that could be unlocked in a better way with my guys, and I was right. And it was the same thing that we did with Exist. It was the same thing that we did with Another Life. There was one other mega one that was like that. There were a handful. You can see it in the credits, which are the ones that we did as a band versus just me. But so I came back and we played all those songs, and I liked them all, and I didn't feel like there was any fat. I just thought that they all played a role, and lyrically, I felt like they were all important to kind of string together this thing, which again is like equal parts kind of hope and nostalgia and melancholy and the right balance of all of it to give like a certain feeling to match the way I was feeling. And then I just looked at it and I went like, oh my God, like you can only fit 40 minutes on a record. Like this is 80 minutes. You know what I mean? Like this is a double record. And so, but even then I didn't tell the band or my management or my agent. I just thought that everybody would think that I was crazy. And they all did and do, and that's fine. Another story. But I just kept rolling with the idea that we're going to make this record. I don't think I told anybody that was going to be it because song wise, it's not that much. It's like 14 songs. And when in the 90s, every record you bought had 14 songs on it. 16 Stone had probably 14 songs on it. So a lot of records had it, but it's not the number of songs, it's the length of some of them. Some of them are the length of 2 songs. Modern Man is the length of 2 songs. The Pines is the length of 2 songs. Terra Firma is the length of a song and a half. Last Flame is the length of like 2.5 songs. So when you start adding up all that stuff, it became a double record. And then I don't know, man. I just went for it. I knew it was ridiculous. I knew we were in the middle of a pandemic. I know I didn't even have the budget to record this album. I'm a guitarist, and when I get an idea and I focus my energy onto achieving the thing, like there's no stopping me, for better or worse. And so I just figured out a way to make it real, and I did everything that I could. I did crowdfunding, and I was selling some equipment. We did a deal. And I did whatever it took to make the record. At that point in my mind, it was like everything else was secondary to the art of like, number one, it's a rare, beautiful thing when you like get a strong vision enough that makes you want to act anyway, because everybody has ideas all the time. But how many ideas do we get that we actually then execute?
Right. And that's beautiful.
Probably it's a fraction though. It's a fraction of the amount of ideas that we have. So like when I had to make a judgment call at that time. And even now I'm still in a way paying the price because that record was hard to make and it had some repercussions on my future. But I needed to make that record. I needed to make that record. It was a singular focus. And once I unlocked the piece with the spirituality and my friend Mark, who's actually, for anyone who's following the story, the trivia of all this, Mark Melchior Jr., the rhythm guitar player of Silvertide, got into Buddhism post Silvertide, studied with a monk. He now teaches yoga and he's a wonderful human being and is like my spiritual advisor and life spiritual guru guy. And he is the one giving the spiritual commentary on Terra Firma through all the songs. I do a little bit of speaking myself in the actual title song, but all the other songs where there's the spoken word stuff that's like threading the record together is coming from him. And when I got those sound bites, which came from a real conversation we were having that I recorded with his permission, we had a 2-hour conversation about life and death and everything in between. And when I like laid those sound bites into the record and the music, like it filled my body with like purpose. I was like, this music has to be shared. It's like I know that there's people who are going to be experiencing things that maybe this record would speak to them, and as the way it was speaking to me. And so it was like emotional. Like I felt like I had to just figure out a way to get the record made. Um, and I did, and I did. That's the moral of the story.
Well, I'll tell you, as just strictly as a fan of music, when you see a double album, you worry, okay, there's going to be filler songs. When you see long songs, you just say, okay, they're just mindless jams. There's none of that on this. Modern Man, every second of that song needs to be there, and it kills the entire way. And then the
Thank
spiritual,
you.
you know, absolutely. Um, like as I mentioned prior to pressing record, I've been going through some stuff in my life in the last year or so that's coming to a head. So music can be so healing, and it's important to get things like that out there because it's going to connect with other people and motivate them and help them and become something that they can enjoy. I just had it happen the other day. I was driving with my son to go see wrestling at the Garden, and we were listening to Silvertide actually because he was like, "Who are you talking to tomorrow?" And I showed him that. I showed him this, but then I started listening to some songs I had written in like the late 2000s with the band I was in at the time, telling stories about where I was in my life then. But it was hearing myself say these things to me now, it was saying something totally different. So it's cool
Wow.
to have something like Terra Firma because I think all the things that some assuming here, so please correct me if I'm incorrect, but the things that it was getting out of you and letting you feel and stuff in your 30s, 10 years later, it's going to hit you in a totally different way. And I think as the creator, that's crazy and awesome.
It's interesting that you said that about my own work though, because I feel that when I listen to like Dark Side of the Moon is a perfect example. I heard that record at 16. At 26, it meant something different. At 36, it meant something different. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it's like the music doesn't change, but we change
Yeah.
and what we take from it changes. But I never thought, I'm conscious of that effect with my favorite records, but I've never thought about that with my own. Although I'd be lying if I said I didn't get emotional when I listened to Nothing Stays, because I think about the lyric and I think about the time and that moment in time, and how true the sentiment of that is, which is um, a direct descendant of that beautiful poem by Robert Frost. And so nothing gold ever stays. So it's that sentiment it hits you differently as you move through time. Now at my age, now looking back, I don't think when we met, those Silvertide songs were written when we were teenagers.
Right.
I recorded that album when I was 18. I turned 19 in the studio. They got me a cake, but it was already at the end of the album. Most of that record was recorded, almost all of it, when I was 18, which is crazy. But that lyric meant something to me different, something different then than it does now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you said that, but I never thought about how it would, what terra firma would be like to me years from now. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I just think things that something that's important and therapeutic in the moment will always be, but it's just going to keep growing and changing and growing and changing. It's awesome, dude. I implore the world to check out that record. I'm going to put a link at the bottom of this thing. Get everyone on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, 2024, what's coming, Nick Perri?
Yeah. What's coming? There's yeah, I mean, if people are following along on my social media, at least you may have been seeing me relearn some songs. Um, we actually are going to rehearse. I'm telling you this, you're the first person in the world to hear it, but we're going to do the first Silvertide rehearsals that we've done in 10 years. And 10 years ago was the first time that we had rehearsed in 10 years since before that. I mean, this is coming into the 20th anniversary of Show and Tell. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
The record was released September 28th, 2004, which we're approaching. And so we are going to rehearse starting just next week.
Wow.
And yeah, there's nothing announced yet. That'll probably change at some point. I'm not allowed to talk too much about that, but I will say that we are getting together and we're going to be rehearsing. And it's just been such a trip to go and play those songs and feel those things. and to be like, oh my God, like I did that. Like, how did I do that at 18? Like there's some stuff that I'm relearning and getting flawlessly, but there's other stuff that I can't even, I mean, also studio is studio. So like there's things that like harmonics that pop out that, you're never meant to duplicate that perfectly every time live. Bands, excuse me, play different live than they do in the studio. And, there's a lot of happy accidents sometimes when you're recording stuff. Like, so there are a couple things, but there's also a few other things where I'm like, I don't know how I did that. Like in Mary Jane, there's this like in the top of the solo, after like the first kind of fiery lick, there's this like descending like all the way down. And I don't physically know how I did it. Like I've tried to like recreate something that's like approximately the same thing, but I don't actually remember or know how I got that part. Like it just, it's, I mean, for $1 million, I couldn't play it exactly the same because I don't know how I did it. So like
Magic.
those moments are cool because I'm just like, wow, that was like 20 years ago. And I know I'm way better now across every metric. But there was a magic at that time that is even hard to duplicate 20 years later better.
Well, it's, again, I was listening to the record last night. All the songs hold up, man. It's still killer. The tones are so good. Like, I'm a guitar nerd, so I'm trying to pick out like, okay, who's playing which part? Now that sounds like a single coil. Is that the Firebird? What's going on? So that's as a fan, again, it's just exciting to hear that coming. I saw, I guess it was NAMM 2005. You guys were at like the Roxy or something. Um, and I was like, my dad was there and he was too lazy to stand. So he had to get a table, but then he had to drink. It was the first time I saw my dad drunk. He's not a drinker. So me and my drummer had to like carry him out. And then we saw Walt the next day at the show and he was so warm and friendly and like just surprised.
Wait, were you at the Roxy show?
I was, absolutely.
Did we talk about this before?
I don't know. I don't think
You
so.
know who else was at that show and who's very famously talked about what an impact that had on him was Mark Agnesi.
Really?
Yeah, he had just gotten
Wow.
to LA. He
So
had
this
just
is
gotten to
before
LA.
norms and everything, or
Oh yeah.
wow,
This is 2005.
wow.
I remember that show very well. It was a big moment for us. We were headlining the Roxy, and our tour bus was parked out front. It was a sold out show. It was a great show, and like a lot of the shows at the time, we were partying after the show and never went to bed,
Wow.
and ended up having to do NAMM the next day. And I was like on a different planet. Uh, so yeah, that was a very interesting NAMM show and quite a 48 hour adventure. But I remember that show, and I remember uh, a number of things about that show, and just about that time, and how pure and good it was. It was that was like in one of the sweet spots of Silvertide.
Yeah. Well, the beginning of things is always magical, and then
Well, that was actually closer to the middle.
okay, I
There
get
was a beginning which was even more innocent and more um, and even maybe in some ways even sweeter. And then there was the end, and you know,
was there? I don't know if you can answer this question, and I'll chop it out if you can't. But so my drummer's this guy Tom Pizzani, and he worked at a studio in Jersey. I think he was working with Howard Benson. I'm not sure, but he told me that there was second record songs that never came out. Did that happen?
yeah,
So he's telling me the truth.
yeah. So what ended up happening, I'll tell you this, and um, we so after show and tell, after the album cycle, we did what we did before show and tell. We went up to this house in Potter County, Pennsylvania, which a friend of ours owned. When I say it's like a mountain house, I mean like real deal. Like you had to chop wood, chop trees, chop the wood, and put the wood in a wood burning furnace to heat the
Wow.
house, like in the middle of nowhere. And if you wanted something from a store or whatever, like you had to drive like 30 minutes to go get something.
Cool.
And it was like total submersion into wilderness. And we wrote a ton of songs up there that ended up going on show and tell. And then we went back up there for like the reboot of that experience to write songs for what would be our second record. And we did. And we wrote a lot of great songs, 16 songs or more. And we handed them into our label. And our label, without naming names, for whatever reason, like they just they didn't like. It's a shame because now I look back on this and they were great and they really represented where we were as a band, and they were denied. Like, this is one of the pitfalls about having a label and blah blah blah. Like, they basically said like, no, we don't like these. Like, try again. You know what I mean? Which was a real shame because those songs, I'm looking back now and going like, wow, they were killer. That should have been our second album. But then we ended up writing another batch of songs, but we were already getting in our heads about, once people start to put their hands into the thing, man, it loses its purity. And then we were working with a producer and he put his hands into it. And we ended up making a second record that will never see the light of day. Thank God, because it just wasn't, not that it wasn't recorded well, it just wasn't representative of what Silvertide was.
Sure.
And so I'm really grateful it never came out because it never like tainted the thing of which at least people who love that band, they love the music we put out. Every song that we ever put out, there's no duds. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful to have left it on that note. And we've talked about like remixing and mastering the songs that we recorded up in the band house, even though they're just demos. That would have been a more representative second record. But we did some songs in North Jersey. We cut a second record in North Jersey at Bennett Studios and at Water Music and some other various studios up in North Jersey. But they will never come out.
Well, thank you for putting clarity to that, because that's been sort of an urban legend between me and, he's a very close friend of mine. I'm like, dude, do you have him? He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, then that's not real. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. So, all right, he'll get a call later. He'll see this and be like, I told you, you motherfucker. Anyway, so I think one of the coolest parts, and I've kept you for a long time, so I'm going to just touch on two more things if that's okay. Gear-wise,
yeah, of course.
It's cool to watch your, thank you, your social media. You're popping out old guitars and things that are part of your legacy. This particular guitar in your lap has a certain pedigree to it. You want to go into that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, this is for people who know and who don't know. This is Bella. This is the original Bella from back in the day. This is probably I would say that this is and I'll talk to you about the Strat that's over here in a second too. These are the only two guitars that I currently own that are from the original era of Silvertide. And I didn't use this guitar in show and tell. I didn't get it until the first tour we did after making the record. Someone backstage sold me this guitar. And it's not a vintage guitar. It's actually a 2002 1957 historic reissue. But because I played the equivalent of what would have been 50 years worth of shows on this guitar, it's aged like a 50-year-old Les Paul. It feels like a 50s Les Paul because it is so absolute. I don't know if you can see the nicks and I mean, it is just beat to heck. And the neck has,
a star
chunks out of it.
At one point, it had a decal.
There was a decal on this guitar for a long time, which I put on in 2005 and then took off in like 2019. The star was on the guitar for a long time. Yeah. I kind of wanted a fresh, even though this is the guitar from that era, I'm different and I'm wielding something that, is familiar, but it's a new chapter of my life too. So it took me a while to figure out how I wanted this guitar to represent both the past and the present. But I'm stoked on where it's at now. I ended up taking off. I had no idea that there was a zebra under here. I took off the thing thinking it was going to be black. And I was like, oh my God, how cool. Like, that made my week when I took that off. And it also gave this pickup just a little bit more bite. So it's just, I don't know where it's sitting right now. It sounds so good. And I've been relearning the songs, and it's so interesting because it's almost like this guitar remembers the notes of the songs. And what I mean by that is, like, I can play anything on this guitar. I can play Thieves music. I could play other music. And I use this guitar for everything else I've also ever done post Silverchild. This was my Perry Farrell guitar. This is my Shinedown guitar. This was my Matt Sorum guitar. This is my Jimmy Necco guitar. Um, I believe I even used this on the Christmas EP that I recorded with my sister. Um, I'm 99% sure it's this guitar as well because I did the Don Felder. We did the Eagles Christmas tune as well, and I played the Don Felder
Cool.
solo, and I believe it was on this guitar as well. And I used this guitar through Mount Holly. And the only band I didn't really get a chance to use this guitar much with was the Thieves, only because it had a truss rod problem and it needed to be repaired, and the guy had it for a pretty long time. So I just got it back, but I did use it. There's one song on Terra Firma that this guitar is on. It is on a bunch of stuff from Sun Via too. But there's one song that I recorded before this guitar went away, and it's The Pines.
Cool.
All of The Pines is this guitar. But anyway, when I'm relearning the Silvertide stuff, and I go to play like certain things, it's almost like the guitar has a memory, and those licks, like it does feel like there's like more harmonics, and there's more like it feels broken in. If it's so odd to say or to verbalize, but it feels broken in when playing those parts as opposed to other things. Like I could play The Pines and it would be like, okay, cool, that's The Pines. But like if I'm gonna go, it just it something about it feels different. It just feels like the song, you know. Um, so that's Bella, and then this guitar is really interesting. Under its current name, this guitar would be known as the Ohio Player. And a quick story about this guitar. So this guitar has even a longer history. This neck of this guitar was on Show and Tell.
Wow.
Long story short, in 2002, the guy who would eventually become the A&R guy of the band, who worked under Clive Davis, James Diener, he took us to Fender in California and had Fender make me a guitar and Brian Weaver a bass. This is before we made the record Show and Tell. And Fender, I mean, it's crazy because I was a teenager and so young, but they made me a guitar and they put my name on the 12th fret of the, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, Perri.
And so they asked me what I wanted. I could have any guitar, which is so ridiculous, in the custom shop. And I said I wanted a 69 Strat. I was and am still a huge Hendrix fan, and I said I wanted a 69 Strat in natural. And so they built me a guitar that looks very similar to this, and it was this neck. And I used it on Show and Tell, and I toured with it. And at some point on tour, I never was the kind of guy who would like smash guitars. I did break a guitar or two on occasion, maybe once or twice in my life. I always felt bad. I just thought there's too many people in the world who would love an instrument than I needed, to break a guitar. But that being said, we played so many shows, 1,000 shows as a band. Things do happen and things do get broken. And I had my Flying V broke the headstock. My Firebird broke twice. And the original body of the Strat that Fender made me broke. And it broke in an odd place. It broke all the way down here.
Wow.
And so I parted the guitar out basically, and this neck went into storage. And my buddy Tones Chaser, Eric Coleman, from Ohio, he who works for Stumac, and he's a musician and a sweet guy. And he called me and said, "Dude, I got this body that they're gonna like throw away. It was like in a discard pile." And he says, "It's wild looking. It's a one-piece swamp ash body. I mean, look at the grain on this thing. No one has ever seen a guitar like this." And they were going to throw it out, which is mind-blowing. But they were going to throw it out because there's a knot that goes through here and in here, and you can like see through it. So basically the guitar had like a hole in it, you know what I mean? Through the tremolo cavity. And because of that, it was deemed discard. So he sent it to me in the mail, and it didn't have any holes drilled, but it was it was a blank body in the shape of a Strat, And I had my shop at the time, Perri Inc., which is a whole other story. And so I had tools, and I routed and drilled and did the thing, and I married it to this neck. Um, and it just like became, I call it the Strat killer. This guitar rules. And the crazy thing is, so most people would probably have heard like this guitar, well, the neck, but somehow it sounds identical to what you hear on the record. I mean, identical,
Yeah.
but it's like even more. It's like if that guitar was resonating at a 9, this guitar is resonating at a 10. It's even better. It's better than it was, but it sounds the same but better. So for whatever reason, the world worked out to where I got this guitar back, and it's even better. But because the body came from Ohio, I called it the Ohio Player, and it's got my daughter's handprint on the back, and my two cats, Tiny and Cairo, and their footprint. So it's a special guitar. But this came back out as well for obvious reasons. And to do a proper Silvertide show, I would need a Gibson and a Fender. You know what I mean? And mostly the Gibson, but there are Fender moments. And for example, California Rain, you can't get that sound on a Gibson. It's a Strat. You know what I mean? And same thing with Foxhole JC. That song, once it's a Strat.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's no way around it. Um, I'll probably, what's interesting is I haven't thought about how I'll do Nothing Stays, which is my all-time favorite Silvertide song.
Really?
I used for that guitar, I used the Flying V with single coil pickups.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
if you've ever seen a picture of it, but I had a dream, and I had a mahogany 67 style Flying V. It was a faded, when they're faded series, like from the early 2000s, and it
Mhm.
had like an ebony board with crescent moon inlays. I don't know if
Yep.
you ever saw them, but they
Absolutely.
did a run of Gibsons. They did SGs,
Mhm.
like a faded red, a satin finish, and I had the Flying V, and I had a guitar tech in LA. We routed out the body, and he put in 3 single coil pickups. So it was like a Gibson Fender hybrid. It was a Gibson guitar, Gibson scale length, but it had single coils, and that's what I used on Nothing Stays
Wow.
to get that. I think it's probably closer to a Strat to get, because that's like a real single coil. It's fat and ballsy, but I think that's because of the scale length and the mahogany. But I think it's probably, if I was gonna do it, I'd probably do it with the Strat, just because it's the sonic footprint of the single coil is probably a little more important. But yeah, so I'm going to use these two guitars for probably most of the heavy lifting with what's to come.
Cool. Dude, can't wait. Um, I love the way everyone likes the way, a beat up Strat looks, all the relics and all that stuff. I think a beat up Les Paul is one of the coolest looking things. I want to show you something real fast. I got to grab it. Hang on.
Sure.
So this is a 83 Silver Burst,
Yeah, I knew right away.
but just all gnarly and messed up, and the headstock is, and it's just, I don't know. It just feels better when it has some miles on it.
They always do. It's like a baseball mitt. It's like you don't want
Yeah,
to put on a brand new stiff one. You want one that's broken in and feels, you know,
absolutely.
comfy. So I think that's, I mean, obviously that's an appeal. That's why Gibson and Fender and everyone is going through such a arduous thing of like trying to make, relic guitars, because they want them to feel broken in,
Yeah.
because there's an appeal for that.
This one
Hence our
came
vintage market.
all beat up. The guy, I think, lived in a house made of cigarettes because the case and the guitar reeked. But I let it, I got my tech, put new frets in it and get it going. But it's just magic in there. So I want to do
That's
one.
sick.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. I want to do one more thing before we go. So last time I did my this or that questions, but you already answered those, and I'm confident, knowing you as much as I feel like I do, your answers would be identical because you know what you like. So we're gonna do a different game. I'm gonna do
Okay.
it first to make it easier for you. So, top 5 favorite bands in this moment. It could change as soon as you say it, but I'll do mine to make it easy. So mine would be Pearl Jam, Nine Inch Nails, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Blind Melon.
Wow.
Yeah, your turn.
I want to like have a side conversation with you about some of this because it's so cool. Blind Melon has a big influence on Silvertide. Most people don't know this, but Walt and Mark from Silvertide, their favorite band growing up and through the early years of Silvertide was Blind Melon. And Walt Lafferty's favorite singer of all time is Shannon Hoon.
I
Of
have a
all
word
time.
to change tattooed inside my arm. Love that song. Love that band.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Silvertide wouldn't have happened without Blind Melon because that was like their and Radiohead like those people wouldn't think of those as being obvious influences, but they influenced Walt and Mark and their songwriting and Walt's lyrics
Wow.
and big influences, big influence. In fact, when I met Walt, he was playing well, one of the early times that we hung out, he was playing Karma Police, and he did such an amazing job. And I remember, and also playing what's the Blind Melon song? Something with bones.
Bones. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe there's a song about like a serial killer or something that he was playing.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Um,
is it on Soup?
yeah. Skinned. I know what you're talking about. I'm bad with names. I'm the worst name guy, but yeah, it's on Soup. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Like
song about a
country
serial
and
killer.
musical. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really wholesome topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so top five band. Well, I already said number one is Pink Floyd. There's no questions. Number two would be the Beatles. Um, this is tough of all time. Pearl Jam would probably be in the top five. Um, could it be artists too?
Absolutely. Yeah. Make it your own. And it
Uh,
could change as soon as you say it. It's just like to make you uncomfortable.
Neil Young.
Okay.
Neil Young. I mean, yeah, this is hard. Neil Young, and I would say at the moment it would maybe Tom Petty would be in the top five.
Awesome.
Yeah, but there's other ones that I want to stick in there too. I'm looking around at all my tapes and I think by the way, for the record, I've just been in like a year long, like mega Nine Inch Nails and Alice in Chains. I really went back to both and Soundgarden. I went back to a bunch of '90s bands, but really, really went down into the Nine Inch Nails rabbit hole. I've been listening to like almost nonstop for about a year because the catalog is so big. You know
Yeah.
what I mean, it's like when I digest a record. I mean, I knew the Downward Spiral. I knew Pretty Hate Machine. But then I kind of got into other music in real time when it was happening in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like The Fragile, which is now probably my favorite Nine Inch Nails record,
My favorite too.
double record,
Yep. Yep.
double record. Dude, have you seen this? Did you see my Instagram? I found this was this super rare.
There's a
This is
song on there that's not on the CD version.
there is.
I believe on the cassette double one, there's a song. Check the track list. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's a song on there that's not on the CD version. That's
I've
awesome.
never cross referenced it.
It's instrumental. It's nothing crazy, but it eventually came out on that like deconstructed version they put out a couple years back.
Oh wow, you're gonna make okay. I'm gonna when we hang up, I'm gonna look at the track list. This is like I've been listening to this on repeat.
Amazing.
It's so good, and I couldn't believe that I found this. These are not easy to find, and they're very
No.
expensive.
Yes.
But that's like been ruling my world. And then I found this not long ago. Did you see this?
Oh wow, dude.
I don't know if you're seeing a
Oh,
reflection.
Woodstock. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, this performance was
With the mud.
mega, mega, freaking mega. So yeah, that's so cool. Yeah,
It's an interesting question because I feel like, so I just turned 40 this year. And when I was growing up, all my friends had huge CD collections, and then we got into vinyl, but so you'd be that, and then VHS, and it turned to DVDs and books. And you'd go into someone's house and you could know so much about who they are and their interests by just flipping through, any of their media collections. And now it sort of all exists digitally for everyone. So when you ask someone that question, it puts them in a spot where they have to almost identify themselves, define themselves just for a moment. That's why it could change. But Usually the first couple you spit out are the real ones, and then you start second
Yeah.
guessing. Like, I'll flip out Zeppelin for Alice in Chains sometimes. It depends on my mood, but like Blind Melon, Pearl Jam, Nine Inch Nails, those three are always in there for me. Crazy.
Well, it's interesting you said that. Yeah, I mean, without thinking, Floyd and the Beatles are just like they're not going anywhere. But the other ones, you're right. I guess they can rotate. Like Cream slash Eric Clapton has to be up there.
Yep.
Zeppelin has to be up there. Um, I mean, there's other guitar like Johnny Winter had a huge influence on my life. I don't know if I would say like he's in my top five favorite artists of all time, but like as a guitar player, he had a tremendous impact on my playing. Same thing with Angus. AC/DC is not in my top five favorite bands of all time. Now they were when Silvertide was coming together. They were, you know what I mean? So that influence is like you can't like detach that from the music. Um, and so was Eddie. Van Halen was huge for me as so many other kids. And because of Eddie, I started modifying my guitars and learned how to solder and work on guitars, eventually build guitars. And then, to end up on tour with him is just like, it's just ridiculous.
I could talk to you for hours just about that, but I don't want to go down that hole because I cannot process what, I've heard you tell stories. I've read stories of interactions on that tour and playing, and I can't. That's pinch me,
We'll save that for our third interview. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, brother. Thank you so much for your time, making time. I know it's a busy week here between Christmas and New Year's, but I look forward so much to Silvertide stuff in the coming year and just continued music from you and watching all the stuff on the Instagram and live. Maybe we'll cross paths in Anaheim in January.
Yes, I will be there.
Cool.
I'm actually moving. I'm moving back to California.
Cool. All right. Sick.
Yeah. So there's so much more that I want to do musically, and Silvertide is going to be a part of 2024, but I'm not even anywhere close to being done, with the path that I'm on. Yeah. So I've got big plans for. It's going to be a minute between Terra Firma and album 3, but I hope, and I'll just leave this out there into the universe. I hope that in next year you'll get at least a couple singles. Cool. Of new songs from me that will hopefully then be a part of whatever is the next body of work in, maybe 25 or something.
Even the session stuff that I can't see the name because my computer is frozen here, but that Love or Heart.
Love Tape. Dude, Love Tape.
And that most recent video where like the making of kind of stuff. It's awesome. Awesome. Keep going.
Yeah, have fun.
Take it over.
Thanks, man.
All right.
It's fun because I get to stretch out in a way. Like I was in LA quite a bit the end of this year, and getting to do what I do in the context of other people's things is so cool and so interesting because it's just interesting, but it's still me. It just framed a little different, but I dug it. So I'm going to do a lot more of it, I hope.
My buddy Dave Tanteo was in a band called Born Cages, and they did something with.
Oh, you. Dude. Yes.
Yeah,
I know Born Cages. So wasn't the singer of that band Vlad Holiday?
Correct. Who's now on his own, but that was the thing before that. Yeah, Vlad's
awesome. Vlad is awesome, dude. His music. He just moved from New York to Nashville, but he's a very good friend of mine, and I talk to him all the time. I love his music. Like it is so moody and
he had
so
a punk
cool.
rock, like a Green Day, American Idiot punk rock type band called. Oh man, I just had it. Damn, I just lost it. But they went to the same college as me, so I knew him and Misha from there. And then they, just everything went where it went. But yeah, crazy. Jet Lag Gemini was his first group. Yeah.
Wow.
Life is weird.
Jet Lag Gemini. I'm gonna write that down and I'm gonna text it to him.
Absolutely, dude. Good riffs, good fun music. Like 2004, 5, 6, 7, that era. Yeah.
Gemini, like is in the sign.
Correct. Yeah. And it was a Ramapo College in Malwan.
I'm just gonna text him Jet Lag Gemini, and that's it.
Awesome.
Just see what he says.
It's gonna be amazing.
Okay.
All right, dude. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So good to see you, man. Happy holidays.
Thank you, brother. You as well.